Chapter 11, The Christmas Quilt by Vannetta Chapman. The hospital gown felt foreign against Leah's skin and skimpy, especially the back portion where there was a distinct draft. She was relieved when the nurse helped her into the bed and pulled the covers up over her. At least that allowed her to keep her prayer cap on. Annie had helped her fasten it over her long blonde hair before the paramedics had arrived at their home. The braid and bun were a mess, but her head was covered. There would be time to recomb it all later. Worrying about such a thing might seem trivial to some people, but Leah had never been out in public with her hair uncovered. She had enough to think about right now without feeling self-conscious about her hair. It wasn't so much that she feared it would be a sin. She was certain God would understand. No, it was more a feeling she'd left much of her old life behind when she'd been lifted into the ambulance. The prayer covering was a small symbol of who she was and all she had embraced when she joined the church. It helped her retain her balance and identity. Silly maybe, but at this moment she needed to keep as much of her old life as possible with her. Nurse Gabriella adjusted the second bag of IV fluid, the one with the medicine, and practically clucking like a mother hen when Adam walked in with the doctor. "How are you feeling?" Worry marked Adam's face like age lines on the old men who sat around watching the Kenner play baseball. She marveled how the last 24 hours had brought them together, almost as close as when they were first married. Hot and a little nauseous. The pains? They've stopped, Adam. The medicines they're giving me, they're working very well. That's good, then. We did the right thing to come. He waited next to her bed, his hand touching her shoulder, and Leah was suddenly sure they had done the right thing. She'd never been inside an English hospital before, but it wasn't so frightening with Adam standing by her side. Dr. Kentley had walked in with Adam, and he stood now at the end of her bed, studying her chart. It wasn't written on paper the way Samuel kept records. Instead, her information seemed to be kept on some sort of computer board. There was no doubt it was her chart, though, for his gaze moved from the monitors to her, then back to the tablet. Handing it to Nurse Gabriella, he looked directly at Leah. "The magnesium we are giving you is what stopped the contractions." "Yeah, the nurse explained it to me. It makes me a little sick, but that is better than the pains." "Magnesium can also cause you to be flushed and even tired." He was older and had no hair on the top of his head. The light from the morning sun shone through the window lining one side of the room. The sun's rays made the top of his head somewhat shiny. It was difficult to be afraid of a man with a polished head. Plus, he had very kind blue eyes covered by white bushy eyebrows and wrinkles spreading out from the sides. "It will be good to rest," Leah agreed. "It was a long night." "I imagine it was." Dr. Kentley pointed to the fetal monitor she was wearing. "We'll run the magnesium for 48 hours, and we'll need to leave the monitor on while we do." Leah touched the blanket which covered her gown, where it pooched out from the stretchy band and monitor placed around her stomach. "Can't ever say I've worn a belt before," she admitted, rubbing her stomach. "It will feel good to take it off." "The monitor allows us to measure your baby's heart rates continuously." Dr. Kentley held up what looked a little like Samuel's stethoscope. "I'll admit to being somewhat old-fashioned, though. I still like to listen myself. Do you mind?" Leah glanced at Adam, and they both shook their head no. They didn't mind at all. The doctor had helped their babies, and what he had instructed the paramedics to do had helped them. Maybe he had saved their lives. She moved her arm, the one with the IV in it, on top of the metal handrail. "Blenda has one of those," Leah said. "A Doppler?" "Yeah. Blenda would be your midwife, then?" Leah nodded as Gabriella pulled down the blanket. Dr. Kentley placed his Doppler on the mound that was her stomach. Leah was used to this process. Glenda, Samuel, and even Annie had listened to the baby's heartbeats before. They'd even encouraged her to listen, though mostly of all she had heard was a swish swish sound that reminded her of swimming in the creek. Dr. Kentley's eyes went up and around and finally met hers. When they had, he smiled nicely, and more of the tension in Leah's shoulders melted away. She glanced up at Adam, but Adam was frowning at the Doppler. He had never cared much for medical procedures. Once he had admitted to her that he didn't understand how Annie would choose such a thing to spend her rumspringa on. Most of the things his sister did when helping patients made him nauseous. All right, Dr. Kentley pulled the instrument off his ears and settled into the chair beside her bed. Gabriella pulled up the blanket and tucked it around Leah as if she were cold. She wasn't cold, but it did help her feel more covered, and she was grateful for that. She smiled her thanks. The heartbeats for both babies sound strong, but we're not out of the woods yet. His emphasis on the word yet set off warning bells. You mean the Boplin are still in danger? Hard to say, Adam. Leah was surprised the doctor knew her husband's name, but then they had walked in together. Perhaps they'd introduced themselves in the hall. But you're the doctor. A doctor, yes. A prophet, no. The white eyebrows wiggled. Leah experienced preterm labor, something fairly common with twins. It has slowed down with her first few doses of magnesium sulfate, which I would like to continue for at least 48 hours. 2 days isn't so bad, Adam muttered. Leah knew he was worried about their being away from the farm. She didn't like it either. I'm concerned there may be other things going on we're not seeing here. Perhaps the early contractions were a warning sign. I'd like to run a few tests. Why? Adam asked, becoming more agitated. Dr. Kentley didn't answer immediately. Instead, he waited for quietness to settle around them. Then he asked Adam a question. Do you work in the fields? Yeah, some. I have a small place. That's good. Your children will be able to learn the old ways. Adam nodded. Leah wondered how much this English doctor knew about their way of life. No doubt he did see many Amish patients at the hospital. And what do you grow? Corn and hay. When the doctor only waited, Adam added, the hay is a mixture of clover, as-like, Alpha, and Timothy. Dr. Kentley grunted. Good blend. If you noticed your corn or your hay was not producing as it should, you wouldn't immediately run out and apply more fertilizer. Adam didn't speak, only shook his head. You'd check it out. Try to find out what was wrong. Are you comparing me to hay? Leah asked, her fear draining away as she tried to decide if she was offended. Hay is a blessing from the Lord, wife. I was using the farming metaphor so Adam would understand why we need to do a few tests. Kentley stood and patted her hand. I'll be back before your evening meal. We should know more by then. Adam had experienced slow afternoons before. The day his father was in the hospital had stretched on endlessly, one wretched hour dragging past the next. He'd stayed home to look after the farm, and no one had a telephone then, so he waited for the bishop to hear from the Englisher who lived across the street, and then he drove his buggy out to tell him how things had gone. It had been a long day. Then there had been the afternoon before his marriage to Leah. It had seemed to scuff along like an old workhorse, taking much longer to pass than was possible. But this afternoon, he wasn't the type of person to watch a clock, but the one on the wall in Leah's room did nothing but frustrate him. Every time he glanced at it, the hands had barely crept another 10 minutes forward. At least the nurses had allowed Annie to join them in the room. Why aren't you quilting? Adam nodded toward the bag he'd seen her carry from the waiting room to Leah's room. Not enough material? Annie sighed. "Oh, I have plenty of fabric. I purchased the last of it when I was in town with Leah on Saturday." "Then why are you crocheting?" Tugging on the ball of yarn one more time, Annie smiled. "Things often don't work as we plan, right? I put all my quilting supplies into my bag. Everything is measured and ready, but I neglected to wash and iron the fabric first." "Why would you need to wash new fabric?" "There are several reasons. It's not dirty, though. It's new." "Yeah, but sometimes with new fabric the colors will bleed. It's best to wash them separately before you sew them together." "Sounds like a lot of trouble for a blanket." "Oh, Adam, a quilt is much more than a blanket." "If you say so." Annie gave him a "you should know better" look and continued working with the crochet needle and yellow yarn. She'd purchased both from the gift shop an hour ago. It looked to Adam like she was making a blanket, and probably a baby blanket at that, but then he didn't know much about the wonders women did with yarn, only that one needle meant crocheting and two meant knitting. Given the color a soft yellow, Leah could assume Annie was making something for the babies they were waiting on, but playing it safe as far as a boy or a girl. The thought brought a smile to his face just as an orderly rolled Leah back into the room. "All done with the test?" he asked. "Yeah, it was no problem." She went on to describe the sonogram procedure to him, but it was beyond anything he could imagine. Amish families generally did not have pictures made of their babies before or after they were born. Glenda had suggested having one done when they'd first learned of the twins, but they both had declined since Leah seemed healthy. It hadn't been medically necessary, but now it apparently was. "Is she back in her room for good?" he asked Gabriella. "We're all done," she assured him. "My shift ends at 3, but I'll be in to check on you one more time before I go." Soon Leah was napping. He didn't understand how she could sleep with that needle in her arm. The sight of it made him a little queasy. He'd finally given in and eaten the part of her lunch she didn't want, but now he thought the half of club sandwich and tomato soup might be headed back up if he stared at the needle and longed to snaking it into it much longer. "Look away, Adam." "What?" "I've seen that look on your face before. Remember the time you had to help me at the schoolhouse? I was giving flu shots and I needed someone to hold the children." "Don't remind me." Adam put his head between his knees the way he'd done that day. Most of the children hadn't minded the needle Annie had stuck into their shoulders, but Adam had gone outside and thrown up in the outhouse. He didn't mind a shot when he had to have one. Samuel had given him one last year for tetanus. Watching while he did it, though, that was not something he could do. Sharp objects shouldn't go into your arms, and plastic tubes shouldn't snake out. They certainly shouldn't stay there like the one in Leah's arm. Better to think about the engines in his shop. Engines were made of metal. They didn't pierce easily, and they didn't bleed if you dropped them on the ground. How was he going to be a father? Infants were extremely small and helpless. Who was he fooling? He'd probably faint away the first time he helped one of the babies. "Breathe deeper. You're starting to look green." "How can you tell that? I've had my head practically between my knees." "I'm a nurse. Remember, I'm trained to know the signs of someone who is about to hurl." Annie put aside her crochet work, stood, and brought him a glass of ice water. "Drink this. It will help." "I doubt it." "Do what I say, brother, this one time." Adam downed the small styrofoam cup of water in one gulp. He did feel better. Standing, he walked around the room. It was too small to pace in, but at least he could look out the window, seeing the half-inch of snow in the parking lot covering the trees, helped to ease some of his anxiety. Nature marched on regardless of what was upsetting his little world. Where did Glenda go? She had an appointment to check on one of her mothers-to-be, Do you still have Samuel's phone in case we need to call her? We might need a ride home. It's possible they could release her early if... Annie put a hand on his arm. Try not to worry. I sent the phone with Glenda. She's going to have it back to Samuel. He might need it. But we have the phone on Leah's nightstand. It's free to use. We can call Glenda or even Samuel. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that one. Annie sat back down and resumed her crocheting. Leah continued napping. And Adam went back to worrying. Do you think we'll be able to go home tonight? No, they'll want to give her the magnesium through tomorrow. It's possible. He never heard the rest of her sentence because the door to Leah's room opened. Dr. Kentley walked in, and Adam knew by the look on his face they were not going home. In fact, he had the sickening feeling what the doctor was about to say was much, much worse.